My question is about, I guess it's two questions that are both kind of accounting questions, but so my goal for this year is 500,000 in revenue. And I'm wondering, is 10% dedicated to marketing a correct way to think about that? Because I've heard that's what you should expect. I feel like maybe that can be lower. And then I guess along with that, a question's just about overhead in terms of, is there a book or is there a direction that someone can point me in terms of just considering everything in terms of overhead? Because right now, overhead to me is like miscellaneous, which like I'd
Mm,
like to just have a better way of thinking about overhead in terms of not just every other thing in my business, but have it very clearly laid out. And then, yeah, I don't know. Is there a spreadsheet or
okay.
something someone knows about?
Yep. So here's first marketing budget. 10% is that's old school. That's what it used to be. If you follow the DYB system, you can get it as low as 3%.
Yeah.
So if you follow the system, you can get it as low as 3%, as high as 5, but as low as 3. I've got clients doing 2 million and their marketing is right at 3.5%. If you follow the system. Now, when it comes to overhead, it's not miscellaneous. It's more like everything except direct labor and material.
You
Right?
include marketing as overhead?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Everything is overhead except your direct cost, paint material.
Okay. Okay. Is there like, yeah, is there, because it could be anything from gas to
Overhead,
software to
overhead,
lunches.
overhead.
So is
That
there,
might, yeah.
I'd like to be able to like project that out based off of more than just, I guess, going through my expenses of last
Mhm.
year, but I don't know if there's a
Yeah.
way to do that.
Okay. First, just keep an eye on the benchmarks. You don't want to get lost in the details, spend too much time in the details. Your time's more wisely invested in building the business. And so the benchmarks are you want to shoot for 50% gross profit. Okay. To get to 50% gross profit, you generally have 35% labor and 15% material. Now that fluctuates a few points here and there between different companies. And some operate with a 45% gross profit. So as long as you're at least above 40. And then after the 50% gross profit, benchmark is 30% overhead. So just make sure your overhead is within 30%. As long as it's 30% or less, you're fine. I wouldn't obsess about the details just yet. It's not worth it. Your time should be more invested in building the business.
Fair enough. That's great.
So 20% net profit is a good benchmark.
Correct. Net operating profit. Yes. Mhm.
Not including your own salary.
So your salary is an overhead,
Yeah.
and you should also be taking a draw, which does not show up in your P&L. So the draw is technically down below the net profit, but it shows up on your balance sheet. So just keep an eye on the benchmarks. Don't get lost in the weeds just yet. Just when one of those indicators go off, like, hey, our overhead is 35%. That's when you pause and then you zoom in and say, okay, what's going on here?
If labor and materials are right, you can't find yourself spending too much on gas or lunches or something.
Is it worth finding a $10 air on gas or lunch versus that 2 hours you could have spent networking or marketing or building the business? Mhm.
Gotcha.
Mhm. Now it's good. Now the other extreme is don't not ever look at them, but you do. You monitor them. You look at your P&L on a monthly basis. But step one is just look at the benchmarks, right? Look at the high numbers, and if one of those are out of line, then you zoom in and
That's
go from
great.
there. Okay, right
In
on,
that
Craig.
same regard, can I just quickly chime in and ask what's a good benchmark for how much to pay a, oh gosh darn it, a person that does all that for you, bookkeeper?
Bookkeepers, bookkeepers, they range from 350 to 1350 a month. Businesses around 500,000 should be able to find a bookkeeper around 350, 500 a month. Okay, good questions.